Is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. good? Well, I'm actually one of the few people on this planet who has watched all 6 seasons of the show so far, so I do feel like I may be uniquely qualified to answer that question. Let's go wild and talk about every single season of the show so far. Season 1 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is probably the one that the most people have seen, but it is also undoubtedly the worst of them all, and this is demonstrated by how the premiere episode had huge ratings and then they very quickly plummeted throughout the course of the series. Now, what exactly went wrong with Season 1? I think a lot of things. First of all, I think the Monster of the Week format is kind of a hard sell these days. We're living in the golden age of television where serialized long-form stories are the norm, and so this show, by comparison, felt quite dated and quite shallow. It also didn't help that the characters in the first season really left a lot to be desired. Fitzsimmons were basically just 2 dorky Tumblr kids, then you had Ward, who was a complete personality vacuum to start off with, May was just the serious one stereotype, and then there was Skye. Oh, Skye. In the first season, Skye was so intensely unlikable, and it didn't help that pretty much every episode seemed to revolve around her. It felt very much like the writers really wanted her to be popular, and as a result were kind of shoving her down all of our respective throats. I think they must also have been acutely aware of the fact that the reason most people were tuning in was to find out what exactly happened to Coulson. How did he survive the events of the Avengers? Is he a robot now? What's going on? So they dragged out that reveal for as long as they possibly could, and then when it finally came, it was pretty disappointing. I mean, I can barely even remember the bullshit explanation that they gave. I believe it had something to do with Coulson getting a transfusion of Kree blood, and then there was like a robot toying about with his brain while he whimpered the words, "Let me die, let me die." I am not making this shit up. That is actually what happened, and it's pretty fucked. And I also think it puts a very weird light on Nick Fury as a character, that he would be willing to do that to someone who he claims to have been his best friend for a number of years. Anyway, the series did pick up a little bit after the events of the Winter Soldier. We found out that Ward was a Hydra agent, which made him approximately 100 times more interesting. Bill Paxton showed up for a few episodes, that was pretty good. They introduced Victoria Hand and then killed her off almost immediately. Generally, it was a bit shit. Let's just move on, shall we? So season 2 came out the following year, and lo and behold, it was fucking sick! And no one could really reasonably have expected it to be. It was such a huge uptick in quality that, to this day, I can hardly believe it. The season premiere had Absorbing Man, it had great action sequences, all the characters just seemed fully formed. Skye had bangs now, and she looked a lot cooler for it. I think generally, they worked very hard to improve Skye as a character over the season break, and, you know, they succeeded. She came back and she really felt like a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, not just the annoying hacker chick with, you know, a chip on her shoulder. Later on, the season brought in Adrian Palicki as Mockingbird, and she was great in the role. Remember Ward from season 1? Well, this time he's back as a villain, and he's fucking awesome. Twin Peaks fans, we got Kyle MacLachlan playing Skye's father. That's no small thing. Around the mid-season break, they started folding in the Inhumans elements. We found out that Skye's true identity is Daisy Johnson, aka Quake. And you know what, shout out to Ruth Negga, because she's an unsung hero on this show. I really liked her role, and I'm sad that she got written out. Ultimately, what a huge turnaround. I mean, with season 2, this really felt like a Marvel Cinematic Universe production, rather than just some bullshit sci-fi CSI spin-off. I think my only criticism of season 2 is the really tenuous and lame tie-in with Age of Ultron that comes towards the end of the season. It was so unnecessary, and they built up to it so much, and honestly I'm just very glad that from that point onwards the show kind of stops even trying to tie into the movies, because they have no link whatsoever really, let's be honest. Yeah. So following up on season 2 was always going to be difficult, and I do think that season 3 isn't quite as good, but it is still very solid. I mean, they really went all in on the Inhumans elements. Lincoln joined the team, Yo-Yo made her first appearance, there was that guy who could melt metal, so that was pretty cool. JK, he was lame. This was the season where I really started to like Simmons. She has a great episode set on this hostile alien planet light years away, where she's all alone and she has to kind of fight her way back to Earth. I think that did a lot for the character, and I think Elizabeth Henstridge is very good in the role. On the other side of the spectrum, I hate Mac. I really cannot stand him. He is so self-righteous, he just seems to think that he's better than everybody else. And also he gives everyone really annoying nicknames, like he calls Daisy Tremors all the time, and he called Lincoln Sparkplug, and he called Fitz Turbo. And it's like, I didn't even get the last one. I mean, that doesn't even make sense. And honestly, I just wish he'd kind of give it a rest. I've been rooting for him to get killed off since season 3, but instead he just seems to be climbing the ranks higher and higher and higher, so you can't always get what you want. They turned Ward into a Lovecraftian squid monster in season 3, which was pretty cool, I guess, but I don't know, I do miss the character. I think they could have done a lot more with him. I deduct points from this season for writing out Mockingbird and Hunter with the intention of giving them their own spin-off show, and then cancelling the spin-off show at pilot stage. So basically, we've just scrapped those two characters for no apparent reason, one of which has decades of Marvel comic book history. It was a big loss for the show, and for no reason. It pisses me off to this day. I have mixed feelings about season 4. Daisy starts off this season as an emo kid on the run, and really it is the most tedious thing. It's very obvious from the beginning that she's going to reunite with the team at some point, and so it really just comes across like an angsty, moody teenager acting out. And as a former angsty, moody teenager, I really have no time for it. I think she needs to grow up. The season kicks off with a Ghost Rider story, which was very, very average. I think that Ghost Rider looks great in this show, and I think Gabriel Luna is very good at playing him, but the story itself was lame. The villains were just a group of angry ghosts, and they got turned into ghosts by the Darkhold, and then Ghost Rider destroys them. So it was really just something and nothing. You might be sensing that I'm not super keen on the first half of season 4, but the second half of season 4 was legitimately dope. You had Fitz teaming up with a fellow scientist played by John Hannah, and together they build Ada, a life model decoy with artificial intelligence, and surprise, surprise, it doesn't end very well for anyone. Ada hooks the team up to this virtual reality called the Framework, where Hydra rules supreme, and it's basically an insight into what the world would have been like had Hydra's plan from the Winter Soldier gone off without a hitch. It was genuinely thrilling. You've got Daisy and Simmons, they're the only ones who know what's going on, and they're trying to track down their team members and wake them up, and it's so exciting because Fitz has gone completely fucking bonkers. In the Framework, Fitz is this really sadistic guy. He's very high up in Hydra, and if that wasn't bad enough, he's also hooking up with Ada on the regular, so this is all a complete mindfuck for Simmons, and it's probably the most dramatic element of this entire season. It's very effective, and I think Ian DeKuyster and Elizabeth Henstridge really knock it out of the park. What I don't love is Mac, again. He is such an asshole, as always. Of course, he is the one who puts up the most fight about leaving the Framework, and I do understand that he wants to be with his daughter, but at the end of the day, she is not real. Whereas real people, friends, are coming to rescue you. You would think you would just understand that and get on board, but he routinely refuses to and almost costs people their lives. I just really can't stand him. He is such a dickhead. But anyway, he's not going anywhere, so get ready for more Mac moaning later. Season 5 is batshit crazy. This is S.H.I.E.L.D.'s first foray into time travel, where the team is transported to the distant future, where the planet Earth has been destroyed, allegedly by Daisy, and the few remaining members of the human race have been enslaved by the Kree on this pretty dingy looking spaceship. It's all pretty grim, and I did think this was very cool at first. It's certainly very ambitious, so I respect it. That said, I did get quite tired of the futuristic setting after a while, and I was overall very pleased when they finally got back to present day. And from that point there are some nice payoffs and callbacks to earlier on from the beginning of the series. So they finally do something with Graviton, they have Deathlock coming back, there's some questions about whether Fitz is insane, which is quite dramatic stuff. But of course the most notable thing from this season is the second death of Agent Coulson, and I think this is handled really well. It's basically that he has this unknown terminal disease, might be something to do with Ghost Rider, might be something to do with the fact that he was stabbed in the chest 5 years ago. Anyway, it's kind of his body catching up to the fact that he is essentially a walking dead man. I get that Coulson is quite beloved, but personally I was ready to see the character be retired. I just feel like there's not really that much more you can do with him, and that's certainly not helped by the fact that Clark Gregg is an actor with very limited range. Overall, Season 5 is not amazing, but it is good, and ultimately it leads to a satisfying finale which could, and arguably should, have been the absolute end of the show. But it's not. I think that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. being renewed for a 6th season was a surprise to pretty much everyone involved in the project, and it kind of shows. I mean, the end of season 5 had such a feeling of finality about it, to such an extent that the final episode of that season is literally called The End. And so bringing the show back for a 6th season kind of felt like flogging a dead horse. For some reason they felt like they couldn't make this show without Clark Gregg in the cast. They absolutely could have done, and in fact I think this season would have been a lot better for it, but that's a side issue. So they come up with this really convoluted way of bringing him back as a new character called Sarge, and the central mystery of the season is, who is Sarge? Is he Coulson? No, he's not Coulson, but is he though? And then spoiler alert, he's not Coulson. The main villain of this season is introduced like a few episodes before the season ends, and her big plan is that she wants to release this alien flock of birds that nests inside humans and makes them burst open. It's all kind of weird and not very good. I think the only thing I really liked about this show was Fitzsimmons and their ongoing mission to be with each other, in spite of the fact that the universe keeps on coming up with increasingly dramatic ways to split them apart. I feel very invested in their relationship. I mean, we've been watching it develop for the last 6 years, and you really do just want them to have a nice, happy ending. The rest of this season was kind of throwaway for me, to be honest with you, and I was deeply upset by the fact that Mac is now director of S.H.I.E.L.D. because he's still an arsehole. This time he spends half the season pushing away Yo-Yo and giving her a hard time, and it's just like, dude, what is wrong with you? And I tell you, if I was on the team, I would be advising Yo-Yo to start seeing somebody else, because honestly, that guy's a dickhead. So no, I'm not too keen on season 6, and I can't say that I'm particularly excited for season 7, but I've been watching the show for so long now that I kind of have to know how it ends, you know? It's gotten to that point. So is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. a good TV show? Well, yes, sometimes would be the answer to that question. I think that the show has had some very memorable storylines over the years. The characters have certainly grown on me exponentially since the start of the show. That being said, I would just wish it was a bit more consistent, you know, and possibly a bit shorter, because the first 5 seasons have 22 episodes each. And really, who has the time? Who has the time for all that? Mostly I'm interested to hear from other people about their thoughts on the show. I mean, if you've been sticking with it for these last 6 years like I have, how have you found it? Do you find it a rewarding thing to watch? Do you think it's as inconsistent as I do? Please let me know. And likewise, if you haven't stuck with the show, and honestly, who could blame you, has anything made you tempted to revisit it, to catch up? Let me know in the comments section below, and as always, thank you very much for watching.